Anyway.
You had a better last couple of days than I did. We've had a storeroom, a 10 by 10 storeroom in one of the commercial storage places. And when I moved all my gear over here and everything else, and it was chock full. And that was yesterday. We've moved out. I am so happy to be out of that.
I did my year-end shredding, 27 boxes.
There you go.
You saw someone like there was nobody in front of me. I got to the shredding company because you stand there and they shred it in front of you. You know, it's all old documents and everything else, and it was just like people were. There's a long line.
Did you have hard drives and plastic and tapes and stuff, or did you just have just paper? Yeah,
27 boxes of paper that don't no longer exist.
Yeah, I got a few machines. I've got my DV cam machines and stuff like that and boxes of tapes, and I think I'm just going to landfill them.
The funniest one was the biggest thing is I'm paying back the entire cost of the shredding because I was talking to the shredding guy and he goes, "Hey, do you like your Dodge Caravan?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Is that an E85?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's an E85." He goes, I said I didn't know what an E85 was, and he goes, the yellow fuel cap. And I was like, "What's the?" So, yeah, the fuel cap's yellow. And he goes, "That's E85." And I was like, "What does that mean?" He goes, "It means that your gas is $3.50 each a gallon, which is normal for the rest of the country, but I'll tell you in California that's really low." And I was like, "How is that possible?" And he goes, "Well, there's only like 3 places in Northern California, like in Berkeley or whatever, that have it, but it'll be 3. You know, and sure enough, it's like $2 less than regular gas, and it's been there the whole time." And I've had that car since 2014.
So you could have saved $2 a gallon or $1.50 a gallon.
$2 a gallon. A gallon. $2 a gallon. I guess they don't apply any state taxes to it to get
it's heavily subsidized.
And heavily subsidized. Anyway, the point is,
the mileage isn't as good either. But
yeah, that's what
$2 a gallon.
Yeah, $2 a gallon.
Mileage.
Well, that's what I want to. That's what I want to test.
30% reduction.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do the math on it. So I'm now getting. I'm now doing like mileage math right now. So I'll tell you the efficiency.
Do you really want to know the number of what you could have saved if you figured that out when you
Well,
first
but
got
if the
it?
mileage, because it'll be somewhere. It won't be a $2 savings. It'll be like $1.50 or $1 or
so
it might be 50 cents more.
I had a Suburban that would run on ethanol, and the near the Pentagon was a gas station that had ethanol,
right?
And you could just run it right on ethanol. And the first time I filled up, it was like I'm pressing the accelerator and nothing's happening, and you could see the gas gauge just kind of go. This stuff's terrible.
You know, I haven't had that problem. It is.
But this was not E85. It was like E15. It was.
Right.
It was like all ethanol. It was just.
Recycled cream corn from
power issues. I will say that I've noticed that the gas gauge goes down faster. So I haven't quantified that, but I was like, oh, it is. It's definitely not as efficient as it was before. So, but then it got me into the whole thing. Like, well, I should be testing the E85, and then I should test it against all the different, whether it's 87 or 89 or 92 or.
Yes, the higher the octane I have found over the years gets better mileage. You just got to do the math to see if it's worth it.
I was like, I feel like I have to do 2 tanks for each one, and for the amount I drive, 2 tanks for each of those settings will take me 6 months because I don't drive a lot.
And as always, thank you everybody on the panel for being here this morning.
I was listening to this article. Instead of making a lot of our ultra-processed foods more expensive, they just make it with cheaper products but add more water. I was like,
and the sizes get smaller.
Yeah. Dagnabbit. Sneaky.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. Great to have you here on this little kind of dip between Christmas and the end of the year. If you haven't been around a while, we're doing kind of our reflect back shows. And if you come here via YouTube and want to know more about what we do, head over to officehours.global, our primary web portal, for more information. You can also type in the URL that you see below the screen there, askofficehours.global. That'll get you there, or use the QR code if you prefer. Today, our second hour, we're continuing our series of the last week of 2023, looking back at the daily theme shows, and not just talking about which episodes we enjoyed the most. We're going to do that as panelists, but also about ideas for the future. So if you have ideas for Thursday, it's Video Day. That's our second hour today. But we are in our first hour, so anybody, let's see, TJ, what questions do we have in the hopper for today?
Our first question is from Guy Cochran from Seattle, Washington. Guy asks, how did the Mimo Live session go?
Alex, how did it go?
Yeah, it went really well. So we had a session with Oliver yesterday where, I've been using Mimo Live for the graymatter.show with Michael Krasny, and really taking Zoom ISO and passing it in and recording ISO audio, and I felt like I could try to figure this out myself, or I could just ask Oliver to hang out with me a little bit and do it. And then I said, well, if we're going to ask Oliver, we might as well just do it in a session. So we all jumped in yesterday, and Oliver was. What's good is I think with a lot of these things, you don't know what's possible or not. So Oliver was able to tell me, oh, that's pretty hard, or this is how you do that. And some of the stuff was, some of the stuff I wanted to do, I couldn't do, but a lot of stuff he showed me, like how to do some pretty magical things. So anyway, so I'm pretty excited. You'll see if you watch. Great. We don't stream it. We stream it. We'll post it so that you can see it, the results. But it's a lot of. It may seem simple to you, but it's a lot of little things with the super sources kind of opening and shutting based on who's talking, and lower thirds, and just a lot more show that I haven't been doing with the Krasny show, because I just didn't know how to do it. And so we had a great conversation about it, and hopefully we'll do more of those. And also, you'll notice that there's a new thread that I put up for Oliver. Oliver's. For those of us who loved Quartz Composer, there is now a Mimo Composer, and there's a new thread. There's a place that you can download it in Discord and get a free license for a month. And I think it's still in beta. Maybe I shouldn't have talked about it on the show. Anyway, but it's too late now. So anyway, but it's on our Discord, and it's there, and so we'll probably do some more sessions with Oliver. Talking about how that works and figuring that out. So stay tuned for that. But these sessions are a lot of fun. So when you see them kind of get announced, usually they're a good time. There was another session that right a couple hours after us that Andy and Tlaloc were talking about lighting in Unreal, to do simulations, which was amazing. I kind of left it open in the background while I was working on stuff, and it was kind of a little bit mind bending. It's a couple good sessions here. I guess during the break, we all have a little bit more time to sit around and figure things out for the next year. So stay tuned for more of those.
Wow. When Apple deprecated Quartz Composer, there was some gnashing of teeth among a lot of my friends. That was a really popular way to kind of program your own graphics and things. So the fact that Oliver and the team at Mimo Live has something similar is going to be really well received, I would hope, with a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go to the next question.
Roscoe Jones from Madison, Indiana asks, would you ever shoot anything without the proper permits?
Oh, that's never happened in the history of the world.
Never.
Alex?
Of course not. Why would I ever think? I mean, it would cross my mind that you would take photos that there was a little sign that said you couldn't take photos. I mean, I feel like as an American, there's a certain level of First Amendment rights. I can take photos wherever I want. The only thing I avoid, so I will tell you that there are places that I don't shoot photos, and that's usually in government facilities, because there's people, that are armed that will tell me not to. So government inside and around government facilities, I am particularly careful about not even pulling my phone out to take pictures. Because there's some overriding guidance there that I respect. But when it comes to pretty much any civilian stuff, I take pictures wherever I want to take pictures. There's actually even a term for it. We do it so often. It's called stealing shots. And so what we do is I took an F-23 out to the beach in Santa Monica, and we shot background shots for a film. We just ran out there, set it on a tripod, figured out our framing, and shot until someone came and told us to stop shooting. But we got all the frames. So then we go, okay, so sorry, I didn't know. I'll leave right now. That's kind of the proper thing to do is not to be snooty when someone comes over and talks to you. You have to be very apologetic and just go, where do I go to file the forms? Because I'll go get those tomorrow, and you've already gotten the footage, and you just go about your business. So anyway, we had one in I was in Angkor Wat, and I was shooting with an Ozo, so a big old Ozo camera, and I was shooting spherical video, and I wanted to get a whole clean shot of the spherical video, and the security guys came over after I started shooting, and I started trying to ask them, like, have them explain why, what I needed to do and who I needed to talk to. And as I did it, I slowly walked all the way around the Ozo, and they just walked with me so that I would get a clean plate. so then I was like, okay, I'll take it down. Anyway, so yeah, so we do it often. I think that a ski resort owner, this is an article about a ski resort owner that is suing people for taking pictures. That seems like the craziest thing ever. Like, why would you stop people from taking pictures on your slope? It's like the easiest marketing in the world. So I think I just didn't dig into it enough. I scanned the article and I was like, I don't understand. Yeah. So
Mark Giuliani. Oops. I'm not hearing you, Mark.
Sorry about that. What I'm wondering is, after skimming the article, is this more about getting releases from people if you're going to use those pictures to make money off them? So if you have anybody's face in it, do you have to get a release from them rather than necessarily a permit? They're two different things, but
I've dealt with this a little bit and actually talked to an IP lawyer about it. And what I was informed about, now this is going back maybe 15 years, so regulations and laws may have changed. I don't think so, but they may have. You have a certain number of rights if you're in a public place. You can shoot from public sidewalks and things like that. Rules change a little bit when you get on private property. And that's what I suspect is going to be hashed out with this, because the ski resort may be private property. It might also be leased land. It might be tribal land. The underlying legal structure of where you are is going to have some impact on whether or not you need permits and whether or not you need you can get permission, and whether or not you have this right of, if you're in public shooting from a public thoroughfare, you're technically almost always good to go. So you can even shoot towards a building, because it's irrational for people to make their buildings move to get out of the background of your shot. But if you get sued, you always are in this circumstance where if somebody with a lot of economic resources decides to make your life miserable by calling into question your right to have these images, you can find yourself in kind of a mess that way. So my default has always been seek permission. If somebody really causes a stink, try to change the angle so I get off of their property or the front of their building or whatever. And definitely you're in questionable zone if you're in front of, for example, a Wendy's and you're saying something terrible about Wendy's foods. One of the avenues that their big law firm, and I'm not doing this to Wendy's, it could be any legitimate business. But if they think you're shedding negative light on them, one of the techniques they might use is to take you, make your life miserable through trademark infringement or stuff like that. So it's just a very complex set of rules you're trying to follow here. Alex?
Okay, I'm going to reverse myself. I just read the article while Bill was talking. I apologize. I didn't read it last night. It was posted nice and early, and I still didn't read it until right now. So here's the deal. So it's Aspen. So there's a whole bunch of new rules because this is a ski resort that doesn't care about any PR because it's Aspen. Number two is, because everyone knows about Aspen. And by the way, there is sensitivities. I ate at a restaurant in LA I'm not going to mention what it is because they made me put stickers on my camera. Like they actually literally, there's a lot of people there that you would notice, and they gave me stickers that I had to keep on my camera to make sure I didn't take any pictures. So and Aspen's a little like that because you'll see a lot of stars there. Anyway, so number one is it's Aspen. Number two is the cease and desist, and the whole argument is not over influencers taking pictures. It was a commercial entity using those pictures with the Aspen logo on someone's jacket in their ad. So the thing is that, and so now you are shooting, with a cell phone, a picture that is infringing if you use it for commercial reasons. an influencer taking those pictures and putting them up. Aspen's not going after influencers. They're like, it's fine. It's the problem is that someone's taking a picture and essentially it looks like what might have happened here is that Perfect Moment or whatever, may have put those pictures, may have sent somebody over there to do that, or they bought them from them or whatever, or they just grabbed them because of a lot of the EULAs that you sign with Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that kind of give up a bunch of rights to those things if you're not careful. So anyway, I think that this is a very specific thing of using especially for commercial rights. And the one thing I will say is while I take a lot of photos and grab backgrounds and do other things like that, we're super careful about logos. Logos are a really complicated thing to deal with, and you don't want to see logos in your pictures if you can avoid it. You want them out of focus or whatever if you're going to ever hope to use them somewhere else, because then the rights holder is more prickly about that. So anyway, in this case, it was probably well founded, and a ski resort is, unless it's owned by the state, is not a public area. Like that's the other thing that I was reminded of as a kid. I was reminded of often was that a ski resort is not a public area. I got into a lot of trouble at ski resorts because we didn't stay on the paths very much, but ski resort is private property, so you don't have the protections you would have in a public area typically in a ski resort. It's like shooting in a mall, like shooting pictures in a mall. When you're in the mall, it's not public property unless the state owns it.
Chris?
Yeah, the flip side of this, and I'm sorry I'm dealing with things, is, and this is something that we had two big meetings about it just yesterday, about our corporate clients not wanting to apparently live in a world with logos. The number of things and the degree of which I'm being asked to remove identity of things and remove logos, blurring out. Here's an interesting question. They don't want to see the Coke logo because there's a Coke bottle in the background of a shot. Okay. Well, for starters, the bottle's out of focus. It's way out of the depth of field of the camera.
But you can tell.
So yes, you can. But here's the deal, Alex. Let me ask you this. This is where it gets interesting. The shape of a Coke bottle is copywritten.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Do I need to make it so out of focus I can't tell the shape of the bottle?
Yeah, it's complicated.
Okay, I can't show a Ford logo, but I can absolutely tell the difference between a Ford and a Dodge pickup truck. Do I need to blur out the truck enough so I can't tell what kind of truck it is?
Yeah, I have always thought that. I mean, yeah, it depends. I mean, I feel like if you want that much control, then you should have shot it without the thing in the background. Like that was something that you don't fix in post, you fix in pre. Like it's.
But we're doing human interest stories and customer profiles where we go to a city and we shoot B-roll.
Yeah.
And we've now been told we can't have people in our B-roll.
Yeah, that gets into the other new thing, which is right of publicity, and they're having all sorts of hassles in Hollywood.
So I can tell you how to get rid of people.
Shoot on Super Bowl Sunday was my.
No, well. Shoot everything in Iceland. Shoot everything in Iceland during the summer, and then in the middle of the night, at 2 o'clock in the morning, you'll have all these. It'll be empty. It'll just be empty. But the one of the things you can do is do the Photoshop. I had to do this for something, and so what we did is Photoshop has this thing where you can take a whole bunch of images and it'll take the combination of those images to get rid of everybody and everything, and it's empty. And you can do it with video frames. In case you're wondering, if you don't move it. So if you leave the camera locked off, you can just accumulate all of that, and then everything will just disappear.
So after much derision yesterday, the determination was, we charge for our time. We'll blur out whatever you want. And my New Year's resolution is to get much better at blurring and motion tracking. That's
exactly.
That's my new job for 2024.
This has always been a problem, and I think it's going to be increasingly a problem because the world is driven by video imagery now. It's everywhere, and these laws, these regulations, these things like right of privacy. I mean, we've already had things like poor Princess Diana being pursued literally to death by the paparazzi, just violently trying to make sure they got all these shots. And in a public place, it's a messy slippery slope. So I hope they settle down and we get some closure on all this stuff. Let's go on.
We don't have a
since
we don't have a ton of questions. I just want to say it is a little bit different about that because these are policies or in many times judgment calls made by a lawyer who was responsible for clearing a video. And the way this started yesterday is I said, can we get them to write us some guidelines so we don't have to question this? I mean,
and the thing you have to remember, we're taking over here for a second, but the thing you have to remember is that when you deal with corporate lawyers, they are not going to get blamed for being too restrictive. They're going to get blamed for letting something go through and getting sued. And so they have no reason. Like every time you deal with them, they have no reason to allow this to go through. They're like, no, I'm not going to do that because they're just what gets them called to the mat is getting sued, not making it more difficult for PR to do what they want to do.
You can usually get out the words "can I" before they say no. Can I? No.
Yeah.
I raised the question, can we just put a 50-point Gaussian blur over everything but the person's face is talking?
Here's the value.
Unless they're wearing sunglasses, in which case those are copyrighted.
1.4, f-stop 1.4 for everything. Just have everything. This is why all that YouTube stuff works really well. It just goes into like a blur. Yeah.
Love it.
This is what happens when you don't give questions. We take over. So please send questions.
It's an interesting discussion, and people who are out shooting are going to have to confront this more and more, particularly if you have something you think is really cool and you decide you want it to go viral, but it turns out to have one of those logos or something like that in it, and all of a sudden, all the money you thought you were going to get from having this fabulous piece of video is going to go to the lawyers of some big company because they've said, no, I want to demonetize it or you have to sign the rights to me. And it's just a constant battle, and I don't think it's going to get any easier as we go on. Let's move on to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, on Peter Gabriel's I.O. tour, they had an SSL SIX mixer on stage to submix Peter's keyboards. When would you submix synths on stage versus taking individual outputs from each synth?
Alex.
I don't know why they did it here. Oftentimes it's an I/O issue or it's a control issue. So sometimes the artists want to control something that they want to do, or so they want to have control. They want to have hands on there, and especially in different setups, this might be the way that they got that. There's something that is more than just what the audio engineer is doing that they want to be able to do and react to. So having individual control over that feed, or that there's a lot of I/O that is required. Those are the two most common things that I've seen, but in this one specifically, I don't know why they did that, but those would be the symptoms that would usually cause something like that.
I will say Peter Gabriel is one of the most fun acts. If you look on, there's a Peter Gabriel during one of his tours did a thing on the Round. It's one of the best set of shows I've ever seen, but I was astonishing. He was not only playing and singing, but when he had his keyboard on, they have a very choreographed show where the entire band, particularly in this video where they were working in the Round, has to leap and land on notes. And I was thinking, how in the world do you play something like a keyboard strapped to you where you have to jump around? It's a very, very skilled set of protection and sing at the same time in key. So Peter gets anything he wants. As an artist at that level selling that much music, whatever, if he wants a submix and wants extra mixers on stage and hire a person, he's just going to do it because he's at that level. Next question.
Funsak Dorji from Dharmasala, India asks, hi panelists, is a Magewell Director Mini a good encoder for my ATEM Extreme?
Alex, what do you think?
I haven't used it. It looks like a solid encoder, and Magewell's really grown up. Like when they first came out, they were like the chintziest little, like really not very good little things that you put on your computer to get HDSDI in and connect it. And now they've grown up to being a really great set of electronics for encoding and conversion and everything else. And so anyway, I think that it probably does well. I will say that I'm pretty happy. I mean, as someone who does a lot of encoding, and especially in environments where I don't know what the bandwidth's going to be like, I'm really happy with the elemental links of just going to AWS and streaming out. There's a little incremental cost. They're about the same price as far as hardware goes. There's an incremental cost, but the fact it's not the same as buying the same hardware. So you can say, well, I could just RTMP or SRT into AWS, but you're getting more out of it. So you're getting a Zixi with a little bit of elemental pixie dust on top of it to get that transport to really be flexible wherever you are, and you can control it from the cloud, which I think is convenient. So anyway, I would really think about those at that price point. Think about one of those or two of those to do those things. But this could be. I haven't tested this one specifically, but I have a lot of confidence in Nagel doing a good job. So I think it could work well.
Absolutely. I know it's the day after the big holiday celebration, and some of you may be in a gravy coma, but this is an excellent time to ask questions because we have a fabulous panel, and we also have a good little bit of time. So if you have something that you're interested in, today's an excellent time to enter your questions. We look forward to anything you want to know about, and we'll just dive in and go through what we've got. Next question.
Via the QR code drop, Ellen Cavedo from Midlothian asks, Alex likes to use the USB Pre 2 for computer-to-mixer audio interface. I recently got one of those, and it is awesome, but it's $1,000. I also have a Switchcraft Audio Sticks 318 3.5-inch millimeter stereo headphone jack, mono XFMR ISO XLR mic level output that is $80.
Wow, that's an interesting rig. Alex?
Yeah. So, and there's one of the ones that's in between that I hadn't, that I'm still, I love my USB Pre, but there's also a USB Pro from Radial that I think that was brought up the other day. It's only $279, and it's USB to 2 XLR outputs. And I bet you it won't have all the features that the USB Pre 2 does, which is the USB Pre 2 is like, there's a handful of devices sound devices made that, I have one right here, I guess, if you haven't seen it. I've talked about it a little bit recently, but this is the USB Pre 2, and this is something that I used to have, 60 of them, and I'm down to 2 or 3, but this is the most rock-solid I.O. that I've ever had in and out of a computer. It doesn't have a lot of features. It doesn't have any software. It has, check this out, let's see if it'll focus on this, dip switches. See the little dip switches? That's how you control everything on this thing. So, and I think you could probably run a car over it. It's very well built. So this is still out there. It's long in the tooth. It hasn't been updated for a long time, maybe 10 years or 15 years or something like that, but they just keep working. This is great. I think the Radial would be something that I want to test and see how the Radial works because it's less expensive and it's smaller. You should never, ever, never, never, ever, ever, never, never use the 3.5 millimeter stereo jack out of your computer to do professional audio. Ever. Like, don't ever do that. Like, it is bad and wrong. Like, both. And it has been I've talked about it over and over and over again, but I used to hear these buzzes and I would just walk down the back of an event and just find the person with a DI box coming out of their headphone jack. And I would just take it out and just put one of these and just hand it there and write a note. Like, I got to go back to this desk and get this back later after the show, but they're ruining my show. And so I don't care who they work for. They're like, and I would be nice about it, but they're ruining my show. And so the buzz is, the buzz is almost constant, and it's not just ground loop. The problem with the 3.5 millimeter is if that 3.5 millimeter is near your power cable, which is often right next to your headphone jack, it's going to pick up buzz from there too. Like, it's going to, you're going to hear it in there. It is just a complete dumpster fire. And I know that these are very popular and people will tell you other things. It is not a professional way to do that. And you should absolutely never use that back. I don't know how much clearer I can be, but if today we just end up with a few more people never using that headphone jack for professional outputs, the world would be a better place. That's all I got to say. The world would be a better place.
Chris Fenwick.
So, but Alex, let's be real. What are the exceptions when you can use it? So I want to do a reality show of Alex walking around backstage at an event, holding a Mix Pre 2, just on a tirade. Just on a tirade. And also, can we make a video where we actually do drive a truck over it or a car?
No, because
while it's running audio,
expensive.
But show how durable it is. Come on.
I think you could.
If you were real, you'd do it.
I think I would survive. I think I would survive jumping off my deck, but I'm not going to test it. So I'm not going to like. Oh,
I just think it should be a tiered test. You run a motorcycle over it, then a Yugo over it, then a Suburban over it. A fully configured expedition with concrete in the back.
But yeah, I get that. I get that the DI boxes are cheaper. The headphone GI, but there's a reason that they're cheaper. Is because they're cheaper, and it's a you don't have to get. I mean, you don't have to get the USB pre, but halfway between the USB pre 2 and there's the radial, and we'll get one to test it because I think that is a good compromise if that's all you're going to do. If all you're going to do is outputs, I think the radial could be good. It's a USB to the USB to XLR outputs. This one is both I/O, and so it's balanced. It does balance and unbalanced. It does mic and line. It does. It has SPDIF on it. Toslink. It's got Toslink in and out. I've never.
Is there
they need to put that in there?
Optical to audio thing that's really clean that would work? That's interesting because I always
does
thought,
it have a 3.5
no one uses
millimeter
the Toslink.
Sorry.
Does it have a 3.5 millimeter in out?
Well, the Apple used to put that combo jack that had 3.5 millimeter and Toslink.
It has SPDIF. No, it does not have. It has 2 headphone jacks on it, so that's the closest you get is the 2 headphone jacks. So
what would you do if you had handed one of those to somebody backstage and he goes, "Hey, Alex, I'm really sorry." So he unplugs his 3.5. He plugs a USB into that, and then he plugs 3.5 into the output of that. And which direction would you drive a car over it? Long ways or sideways?
Edge up. See if your tires make it.
Yeah,
anyway,
exactly.
We're being cantankerous here, and we're having fun doing it, but we're going to go to the next question.
From Keith Harrison in London, Great Britain. Keith asks, has anyone tested if it's safe to upgrade to Zoom 5.17.1 if I'm using an ATEM?
Ooh, this is an interesting morning to ask that question here in the thing. Alex?
Yeah, the color issues seem to be over. There seems to be some more permissions issues that you have to be careful about. Evidently, as we jumped in here with some of the updates, it now will ask you if it can record, but it's a lot more subtle than it used to be, and then you can't figure out how to turn your audio and video on if you haven't approved it. And so there's some if you're going to record something, which means if you're going to use Zoom ISO or whatever, it seems like the permissions process is a little arduous. So I might wait another week, to just let us figure it out so that we can at least give you a guide on what to do. But we had a little bit of chaos this morning trying.
Yeah, we had a little kerfluffle this morning. I couldn't get into
that. That was the case, right? You couldn't turn it on, right? You have the newest one, right? So you updated.
Yeah,
and then
5.17.1 had a problem, and literally neither my start video or start audio button was live when I first got here to the show. I backed back out. We did a few things, came back in. They eventually, our amazing back-end technical team figured out how to make it all work for us, and that's why the show was on today.
It's asking for a permission for you to, and you just didn't see it because it's much smaller.
Well, not only that, but in the interface, a stripe comes up and it covers over the place where you can put on original sound. So there's just some instability about how they've kind of done everything. Yeah. It'll get fixed. It'll get fixed probably pretty quickly. But it was a bit of a kerfuffle this morning coming into the show. Chris Fenwick, you wanted to chat about it?
So Alex, you said the permissions were just more subtle. Are you certain of that? Because I think
I have a different build. So Bill.
So what on the new one this morning when I came in, first of all, I was very happy when I got to the pre-show crew. So it was all working. I knew my system was working. It was putting out audio, it was putting out video. When I got to the actual show build where everybody connects to the show, suddenly the stage, on stage is what we call it in the back end here, my audio and video were neither operable. They were on the dashboard, but they had red stripes through them and no clicking, no doing anything. They sent me back out. They worked on it a while. They sent me back in. Eventually, the crew here in the back figured out the right series of operations and everything worked, and we're here on the show and we're doing fine. But it was a kerfluffle this morning for a little bit.
Well, I think what they figured, and Alex, I was just double checking on what you had said. You said it was more subtle. I don't think it was subtle. I don't think it was possible. I think what they had to do is they had to turn off the record feature. They
No,
basically had to.
I don't think they did that because I think that they told me that they didn't want to do that. So
I think the bottom line is it's not perfect yet. It's going to be perfect because we know how hard Andy and those guys work. Might want to wait till 5.17.
Yeah, I would hold off on this update if you have a choice.
The issue is that you have to turn on the audio and video, you have to accept the recording permission. I think it was just that we weren't clear where. I think the recording permission's in a new place.
I couldn't find it. I looked at every window. I moved every window. I hid every other app. I looked in every corner of every screen.
Right.
I couldn't find it.
Hey, at least it isn't the new Apple TV update. I don't know if anyone's seen that.
No, what's it?
How about we ruin your interface and make it really hard, and then have it not work at all? Like the Apple TV one is like. I finally tweeted out this morning. I was like, is everybody having this experience? Because it is. I have been using Apple products for 40 years. Right before Christmas, I'm sure because there was some deadline, Apple did an update to their Apple TV that I really believe this, is the worst update to software that Apple has done in 40 years. Like it is literally,
let's talk about this.
It is so bad. Like, and I was like, how did they release this? And then they did it before Christmas while everyone is going to be at home. They inflicted this on everyone while their developers are out. Like I literally am turning off automatic updates for my Apple TV because I wish I had done that. If I was some way that I could go back in time, I would go back in time to like the summer, because the Apple TV software admittedly has been getting slowly worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. But now they took this huge jump where they got rid of movies and shows, right? The movies and the TVs. They did that with Trailers, which was bad enough because Trailers was great as its own app. And they took out right before they took the movies and TV. So now if you go to those little mini apps in the Apple TV, it'll take you to Apple TV. Like it'll say, oh, those are now on Apple TV. Except when you get there, in addition to not being able to find what you were looking for in the first place, there is no Trailers anymore. There is no any of these other things. Not only that, when you click on the interface, I mean, I had to go in there and fix it. I had to figure out how to fix it for my wife and my daughter because they couldn't get, when they clicked on it, nothing happened. And you know how I fixed it? I force quit the app. We are now force quitting the app at least once a day just to be able to get to movies. It is literally, I mean, I have never seen anything that this is like, I mean, we are force quitting the core Apple app on the Apple TV so that it will respond. Because when you try to click on the menu, it doesn't click and not do anything. It doesn't do anything. It's as if you're hitting the controller without any like input at all. So while we're, like it is literally, and they did it right before Christmas, like when everyone is at home, like somebody needs to like, at least I won't say get fired, but someone needs to take some time off and like rethink their values because it was like a whole team might want to like go in a retreat and talk about what they're doing because wow, like it is like the worst update in 40 years. Like it is.
This is the left bar madness where they now have the thing on the left side.
But for me, it is literally not responding. It is like you click on it and it's nothing. Nothing is happening. And so the only way out of that, by the way, okay, so I figured it out after 10 minutes of almost continuous swearing. I figured it out by it's a clean show here, but at home when I'm working on
not at Alex's house,
not so much. So anyway, so the it is I finally just restarted. I restarted the Apple TV and it didn't work. I mean, I literally unplugged it and plugged it back in, still didn't respond. What I had to go into is open up the app and specifically force quit the app. You know, when you do the weird thing, you click it and you spin it up. And I also quit every other app on my Apple TV just to make sure. And then it worked fine for about an hour. And then it stopped working again. And you're just like, it is, for something that's a core app and a core part of what Apple's doing, I am truly amazed at the level of screwed upness that has happened to you. I don't know if Mark, I think I took the conversation entirely.
Yeah, we went in a different direction. We had Mark Giuliani and TJ.
Okay.
Who probably want to comment back on the
I'll tie it in by saying this. My oldest daughter's first words could not be repeated on the show. Unfortunately, I wasn't the one she was mimicking. But anyway, Andy has a comment here that says that you need to accept recording permissions before you can enable camera and mic.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about. Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. But unfortunately, that the accept camera permissions popped up very shortly, if at all, and then it was veiled somehow in the interface, and I just couldn't find it. And I think TJ had the same thing. TJ, you had your hand raised too.
Yeah, same. I could not see any permissions dialog to enable my video and audio to start. And also, speaking of the Apple TV, all of my movies and TV shows have disappeared from my Apple TV, I can see them on my iPad, so I know they're still in my account somewhere. Yeah. But they're just gone. Just plain gone.
I couldn't find. It took me a while to figure out where they were. You have to. There's a roundabout way to find your purchased. But again, this is where the app is breaking, and it's not a big deal. It's not like I have 600 videos that I bought from Apple that I can't get to during Christmas when everyone's home wanting to watch TV. I mean, it was like all we wanted to do was watch It's a Wonderful Life, and it turned out. I think I felt like Jimmy Stewart by the time I was about to find a bridge and and look for Clarence and so but it was just. But literally, I was like, I don't know what thought process happened here that Apple thought that this was okay. But it's the worst update that Apple has ever done, I think. I mean, I don't think that I've ever seen. I mean, it's been slowly. Apple TV has been slowly screwing itself up for about a year. It's been a slow drip, but then they just jumped off the cliff. They were like, "We're going downhill. We're going downhill. Oh, let's just forget this and just ruin everybody's experience all at one time for Christmas."
Chris, you have a quick one? We've been on this for a while.
Well, as much as I love watching Alex go on a rant, it's truly one of my favorite pastimes of all time ever. You did touch on something, Alex, that is important. You said you force quit the Apple TV app and you quit the other apps. How do I quit an app on the Apple TV?
So if you go down to, it's not menu, I think. I can't remember because I only just know where the buttons are, but you can click and hold and they'll pop up just like with your iPhone. And then you literally just top and go, quit,
really?
Just like you do with the iPhone. Yeah. So that's if you have something going wrong with your Apple. I'm especially good at it because I designed an Apple TV app that not the Apple TV app, but I designed an app that ran on the Apple TV, which was beta, which crashed all the time when we first started testing it. And so I got really good at force quitting apps because it would just lock up. And anyway, anyway, I mean, this was years ago, but I got good at it. So I think it's the second button down. You press and hold, and it will go into a state where they're floating. Double click, and they're floating like they do.
Button.
Oh, double click the TV button. I never know what it is. My finger knows where to go, but I don't know what it looks like. And because I just mostly hit them all until something happens. And so anyway,
good strategy.
Well done. Shotgun approach.
So anyway,
well done, Lindsay.
So what you end up with is a bunch of the windows floating like you would see in an iPhone, and then you use the top part that's moving, and you just go like this, and you just.
So you see what we did there? We took Alex's anger and we turned it into useful knowledge, not just entertainment.
No, my useful knowledge is if for some reason it hasn't done this horrible update. Turn off auto and never turn it back on again. Apple does a lot of great things. As everyone knows, I like Apple. But
hey, Alex, the power of office hours. I understand from the back end crew that we actually have a little video from Andy Carluccio about how to fix the 517.1 issues. Can we roll that into the show?
No, we can't.
No. Okay, never mind.
I don't know. Does Andy release that? I don't know if it's like let's not. Start throwing videos
without official permission. I thought because the back end put it in a window that maybe it was okayed. But if we don't know, we will go on to the next question. If it turns out that's we'll get the back channel going and see what happens. Let's go to the next question.
From Art Aldrich in New York. Art asks, I'm trying to evaluate internet connections for live streaming. What are things to look for in testing?
Boy, Alex, what do you think?
So, I mean, in the most basic form, we oftentimes, if I'm going to a location, I'm going to a new location, and they don't know, I'll run speed test. So I will run speed test because speed test is probably the least. There's another one called Speed of Me that I use as well, but speed test is the one that is the most conservative. So and I can see things. I've used speed test for so long that I can see things in the way that it's scrolling the numbers about whether it's stalling or not. So if you see the number freeze while it's doing it, that's actually a stall inside a speed test, and that means you have an unstable connection. So even if it's even if it's there, so that's something to kind of pay attention to. The next thing is that you obviously you want something to look at. I usually use Meraki's, and so I'm looking at the bandwidth that's going through that. The final thing is I stream for hours. Like when we get to a venue, the first thing that I get set up is the encoders, and we turn those encoders on and we just let them run. And then we're looking at something like Meraki or whatever for a solid signal, and we're trying to trying to figure that out. So that's how we how we do that. Yeah.
Mark Giuliani.
Well, I think what would be helpful to know is what speed do you need?
Alex, your mic's open with typing.
What
Go
speed
ahead, Mark.
do you need? What speed do you need for the number of streams you're trying to get out and send out to whatever servers you're using to do the streaming? So is it 6 gigabits per second for 1080, 60? What are some of those reference points, I think?
Okay, that makes good sense. Yeah.
So the number, the math is, it's the number, how I look at it, at 30 frames a second, it's the number of megabits times 3 is the base. So if it's if it's a number of megabits in each frame times 3 is the minimum that I consider okay, which is, so a 1080p signal is a 2 megabit frame, which is a 2 megabyte frame, or 2 million, I'm sorry, the number of pixels, not megabits. So that there's 2 million pixels in a 1080p frame. And if you multiply that by 3, you get 6 megabits per second. That's the math that I use as like minimum. So that means that, and now that does mean that the number goes up. For 4K, it's like 24 megs a second. And so you got to decide whether you're willing to go up that high. You can squeeze it a little bit, but you're now starting to get bad pixels. So you start to get, so at 6 megabits, you start at 1080p. Now, my preference is to go a little bit more than that, to go to 4x. So it's like 8 megabits per second for the 1080p. And then, of course, if you're doing HDR, you add another 50% on top of that. So you have to kind of, so the number gets big. Like you start talking about real bandwidth, when you start doing it at a high quality. So for live, remember, live isn't, you don't have the benefit in live that you do in post. So you say, well, Apple's not streaming that much bandwidth. Well, they are. They're doing 35 megs for 4K. And they have the luxury of spending 2 days encoding that video. I'm doing it live. So what I really should be doing is sending something that's higher than that. Now, not everybody's doing that as far as the delivery goes, but that's but those are the numbers as far as thinking about what my bandwidth is. And a lot of times we're thinking about that because, it depends on what the guides are for, you can send up to, I think, 35 megs a second. I think I've never sent more. I guess I would say I've never sent more than 35 megs a second into YouTube. It doesn't deliver it at that, but you're giving it more data to work with. What I'm talking about is when I'm building ladders. So I'm building the 1080p, 720p, 540, 480, 240. When we build those ladders, we think about that math because I'm doing the encoding that YouTube would normally hand off, and that's what's going to get me a good bit rate there. In general, there's a question about VBR and CBR. In general, VBR is dangerous. Your players don't know what to do with it. You really need to deliver in CBR. You may have a mezzanine that's using VBR, but you shouldn't deliver on an HLS because HLS is all dependent on looking at how fast the bandwidth, the data is getting to you and making decisions about what resolution. If you use VBR, you can surprise it. So constant bit rate is usually what we do for delivery.
Let's go to the next question.
Paul Buchan from Columbus, Ohio says, I'm currently using a decimator to scale the output of an NVR that keeps switching frame rates, HDMI to HDMI. Is there a cheaper scaler the panel recommends?
Alex?
Not cheaper than decimators. I mean, I think that those aren't super expensive. They are, I think Blackmagic might have an up-down cross that is marginally less expensive, but I would highly recommend the decimator. I mean, the decimators are, as far as an inexpensive way to solve this, when you go below that, you're going to end up with things that are much less stable, much more tweaky. So yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Let's go to the next question.
Adrian Watkins from Wellington, New Zealand says, the Office Hours radio app beta has expired for me. Will there be an updated test flight code, or are we ready to release?
Only Alex knows. Alex.
We're not. I don't think we're releasing anytime particularly soon. We'll take a look at seeing why that expired. We'll find out why it's sitting there. But it's probably just that it's over the Christmas break. It's something, and it happened to expire when we weren't looking at it. I opened it this morning, so I'm not totally sure. I mean, I use it every morning, and I didn't have any problem with it. So if something's new, I haven't noticed it.
Mark, do you have a note?
I just checked and mine's expired as well, and I use it all the time.
I don't know why mine didn't expire. Anyway, so that's you're in the future though for me. So maybe
okay. So. Next question.
From Cindy Drosta in Erie, Colorado. Cindy says, my Windows 11 desktop has started rebooting from a bug check at random times. How can I stop that from happening or control when it runs?
I'm not a PC guy, so I don't know if you have something equivalent to Activity Monitor. That's usually my first stop on the Mac side, is just look at the processes running in the background and see what might be running out of memory or causing problems. Alex, do you have some thought about PC land?
Usually we have Courtney here to answer the PC questions, and Courtney's taking a break. He went on vacation and did stuff, so it's all Mac people here, and we're all like, man. All we're looking at, we just look at that question and going, man, this is why I don't use Windows. So anyway, so I don't think after I just finished a tirade about Apple screwing up Apple TV. So no, I don't. Please ask that question again, Cindy. I apologize. It's a little bit of a. I don't think any of us I haven't run into the rebooting from a bug check at random times, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure what would cause that. Yeah.
I will say that the reason I have Activity Monitor on my machine, though, is occasionally, it's rare in the Mac world, but occasionally something will crash you and hang up. And so if there's an equivalent program on Windows that really tracks what's going on and shows you what processors are getting hit the hardest and things like that, and occasionally you just see something that's way out of control, you went, that's what's stealing all the memory and causing there to be so little left that the machine can't handle it. That's my first go-to. TJ.
In Windows settings, sometimes if you search for software or scheduling, there's an option to be able to tell the system when it's clear to do its sort of maintenance work. And you can set your scheduled busy time from, like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or what have you. Take a look in there and see if there is something scheduled to be running during the time, which may for you be an actual busy time, but for normal business, as it were, from the 9 to 5 type of thing, is Windows thinks it's okay to do what it needs to do.
Oh, that makes sense. Alex, you had another note?
Yeah, we just had a note from John Wallace in the chat. He said, look for the BSOD file, and you can see what is causing the dump. Event viewer is a good place to look as well. So there's
a BSOD or blue screen of death file. That's cool.
Yeah, I don't know if
that. Interesting. All right, next question
from Roz in Comox, British Columbia. Any thoughts about Ecamm Live? The software can stream to multiple locations simultaneously. Any experience with this?
We talk about it a good bit, Alex.
I think really hard about that. And probably not do that. So Ecamm is pretty good. So Ecamm is it's a good one. It's not as feature rich as Memo Live, but it's also not as expensive. Of the two that we use on the Mac, again, I'm not a big fan of OBS on the Mac. I know Chris loves it, but I don't think it's very stable. I find that the two that I recommend the most, depending on what people are doing, are Memo Live and Ecamm Live. And both of them and all of them will stream to multiple locations. I don't recommend doing that. And the reason that I don't recommend doing multiple locations from your computer is, most of these software packages, you're asking your computer to do a lot. So unless you have a really beefy machine, what you want to be doing is looking at your total usage, your CPU usage. If that CPU usage is going over 60%, and you're doing a stream that you care about, and I don't know why you would stream if you don't care about it, but if you're doing a stream that you care about and your CPU usage is over 60%, you should worry, and so you should, so you might have some newfangled lower thirds and these opens and 6 layers of video and everything else. And so as you add more encodes, you're going to add more overhead to that process. So I wouldn't, it's not so much an Ecamm issue. If the feature set is an Ecamm, it's great. But what I would think about is something in between Ecamm and your CDNs. So if you want to send out to Facebook or YouTube and something else. What we're doing internally is using AWS to send it out to multiple channels. What I would think about doing for what you're doing is think about Restream. That's a simple way you can stream it to Restream and then send it out to a bunch of locations, lots and lots of different locations. So Restream might be something that's a better solution for you. So those are the that's what StreamYard is another one that will do that kind of multi-streaming process for you. But I would get it into the cloud and then distribute it, because the other problem you have is, in addition to the extra CPU usage, you are also using up more bandwidth at your location. And so you're now more dependent on that. One little stream has a much better chance of getting out. And then once you're in the cloud, you got all the bandwidth you need.
Mark, do you have a quick comment?
I was just going to add the bandwidth component to what Alex said.
Okay, so we covered it. Let's go to the next question.
From Eduardo Augustine in Panama, following up with the AWS Elemental links, you only provide encoding with venues and Ethernet? I've been using LiveView Solo. Can I get the same flexibility with the Elemental links?
Alex.
I think that if you're talking about the LiveView Solo with the cellular connection, we can. What we've done in the past for that is actually use Meraki's with cellular connections to do that. But I haven't used the LiveView Solo as much. We're usually when I go there, I'm looking for 2 different connections to the internet with 2 different encoders. That's kind of, if anything that I get paid to do, typically I've got two ways out. And that might be a LiveView, but I don't really use the LiveView Solos. I have we're right now for office hours, we're using, an 800. At 090, we have a 600, and I used to have 2 600s. I'm not I feel like cellular is pretty dicey when you don't have 6 modems, at least, so you want them to be all bonded together and be able to grab onto those things. When it's 1 or 2 modems, I don't know if I would really it's not a step I'd really want to step on if I had to. So 1 modem is not something that, when we use it as a backup, we mostly have a cellular so that we can get to things, but not so much. I don't think I would try to stream over it. And again, if you're in a pinch, you might be able to do that. But when I did that, I would typically, if I was going to back into a cellular connection, I was typically using some piece of software and my laptop and a MiFi, that I had there. I didn't necessarily use anything that was specialized for that. So I don't. The Solo could work. You're going to add more latency to it. And again, I don't have a lot of experience with the Solo because all my LiveView experience has been. Eduardo is advising me that this one has 6 modem. So he has 4 cellular Wi-Fi internet. That's a pretty good deal. Like the Solo could be a good backup to that. I don't know if I'd use it as my only solution. I guess the other question I have for Eduardo is, where are you going with it? So you're not going directly. So are you going to the LiveView cloud service, or are you going to another LiveView output? I will say that in general, I really like the LiveViews, the larger 600s. I just don't have as much experience with the LiveView Solo. So the MiFi is, interesting. Eduardo said that MiFis ISPs block the upstream on the MiFis. So, and that is one of the big advantages of LiveView in general, is if you're getting the modems from a LiveView, one of the things that's really interesting is that they manage all those relationships for you. So I don't know if that one is built in or you're putting your own MiFis in, but if LiveView is doing it, you oftentimes get some benefit out of that.
Nice. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, is Ableton the de facto standard for live playback, or has Logic been used with its live loops feature for the same role?
Alex?
Yes and yes. Ableton is the standard, and Logic can be used for that. So it's not as good as Ableton. It doesn't have a it's not as good as Ableton as far as it's not as feature rich, and really built for that. And Ableton just owns that market. But every update to Logic has more tools to do that. So but I think that most people are using Ableton that I know.
There you go. Next question.
Sam Reed from Maine asks, if you had a large project where you were limited to only available light for the entire project and also frequently had to shoot in low light conditions, which video cameras would you choose? Interested in examples from all budget tiers. Thanks.
Alex, start us off.
Something with a full frame sensor that has a lot of good low light. So a lot of the Sony full frame sensor stuff. So I took an A7 I had to shoot a lot of stuff where I wasn't going to be able to use lights, and so I took an A7S to Iraq, and we're shooting interviews there and doing stuff there. We didn't have any; it was all available light. I couldn't believe what I was getting. I was really getting solid footage on something that just looked like a little still camera, and it was in a pretty stressful location. So it was something that I couldn't. Turning lights on was not going to be a good idea. So I found that the Sony A7 series worked really well in the field for me. When we go to really dark conditions, we shift gears to the Canon ME20 and the ME200. So in really dark, the ME20 will see things that you don't see. Like we were doing a thing where we had folks in a theater, and the artists that were looking from somewhere else, they were seeing the feed, could see the color of the wristbands of the people had on in the theater. The people in the theater couldn't see that. So the ME20, now they're only 1080p, but they're very, very sensitive. The ME200 is a little less sensitive. It's only 1 million ISO instead of 4 million ISO. But those are the really, really dark ones for available light. And I used to own 4 of the 200s because we do multicam. And if I don't know what I'm going to get, I know I can always shoot there. But otherwise, I think the Sonys are some of the best low light ones at under $10,000.
That's been my experience too. Every time I've been in a low light situation, I hope somebody has a Sony camera because I think they're one of the best video things. The other thing that's been surprising to me recently is just the iPhones. The newest series iPhones are pretty light sensitive, and in a circumstance like Alec was talking about where you don't want to take a lot of heavy gear out, give it a shot and see what you get out of it. It's been surprisingly useful footage that I've gotten in dim places. We went out to shoot some Christmas lights, and I just took my phone with me. And, the lights were bright, but I was looking particularly at the spaces between light that was definitely much darker, and it did not get noisy, and it was holding black levels really well. And in areas where there was a little bit of light, I had some detail. Now, it's not perfect, but better than I had expected. So, next question.
Roz McNulty in Vancouver, Canada. Roz says, I need a new router for a new year. My bathroom pipes in my 1,200 square foot condo interfere with a reasonable router. Not a cable company router, possibly around $400.
Alex, what's your favorite now?
Yeah, I think that what I'm looking at moving to, because I have to get a new, I'm going to rebuild my house at some point in the near future. But what I'm looking at is the Ubiquiti Dream Machine Pro is the one I'm looking for there. The Dream Machine itself is a little less than 400. The Pro is a little bit more than 400, but it's kind of a buy once, cry once kind of like you'll put it in and you'll probably use it for the next decade. And there's a lot. The reason I'm moving towards it is so many people in our community that have already put it into their system.
TJ, real quick.
Yes, I also recently upgraded and went with the Ubiquiti Dream Machine Pro, and it's pretty awesome. And the Wi-Fi extenders you can get for it are really good.
Let's try to get one more in.
From Douglas Carmichael, during the pandemic, many said small venues are an important stepping stone for artists. Other than audience size, why did broader market return to larger shows and didn't appreciate as much the unique merits of what a small venue can offer?
Small venue can be so nice. Alex, what do you think?
I still prefer small venues. I won't really go to shows that are that big. I've been to a lot of shows, and I got to watch them progress from being, I got to watch one band, the band live, play for 50, and then 200, and then 300, and then 500, then 700, and then Red Rocks. And I found that at about 500, I was like at my max of this is a good show. After that, I was kind of like, okay, this is too many people. and after that, I stopped going to concerts, and I didn't go to another one until I saw U2, and it was in late 90s, and I was in Cow Palace or whatever, and it was not, I don't know if it's Cow Palace or the Coliseum or whatever, venue. Coliseum. Yeah. And it was worthless. Like I was so far away. I was closer to the parking lot than I was to the stage. And I just didn't I was like, I don't understand why people do that. So I think that small venues are still the thing if you're going to go see someone if you can.
I agree. We used to have in Phoenix a small theater called the Celebrity Theater. It was in the Round, and I got to see Marvin Gaye there. I got to see David Bowie when he was on his first tour before anybody knew who he was. And it was just those intimate, small venues can be really magic. This is an incredible day, and so we're about to go into our second hour stuff. Right now, though, I want to mention that tomorrow's the Isadora Lab with L. Wilson Spiro. Thursdays, that's 10 o'clock right after the show. Not tomorrow, today. And then Saturday's meeting followed the Saturday show is Ruthless Reviews. So that's going to be in after hours right after the show. We'll be right back. All right. Welcome back. All of this week, we are doing a retrospective of what's been happening over the course of the last year here on the show. We've been doing it by day. So today is Thursday. It's our video day. So we're going to be looking at a kind of a retrospective of what the shows have been. Now, this is an active viewer participant thing. Watch through these. You'll be reminded of all the shows we've done over the past years, but we're looking specifically for your suggestions. Maybe this will trigger you for what you'd like to see next year. And our discussion after we do this retrospective will be looking for your suggestions, your ideas, what you liked out of last year. Also, the panel will have a little discussion. We'll see what the panelists liked out of last year's lineup for our Thursday video shows. Let's roll the reel. Oops, I don't see it. There we go. Now it started. Focus on lenses. CES 2023 Field Report.
Mick Reed of Klippen.
Chris Sabato, One Man Show. Paul Richards of PTZ Optics. What's a One-Button Studio? Sony FR7. Office Video Shoots. Ruthless Reviews HDR. Frame Rates. Analyzing Video Interviews. Video Playout. HDR Basics for Broadcast. NAB Projections. Video at NAB. The 5 Basics of Video Content Creation. NAB How We Did It. HDR Glass to Glass. Guide to Shooting B-Roll. LumaFusion Multicam Studio. Zoom Update. How we covered Cinegear. ASL support in office hours. Remote Sports TD Brad Woodall.
Matthew Semiglia of Alteon.io.
HDR Objective Color Metrics. Jeffrey Orthwine and Andy Sullivan. Video Framing. Dan Pizarski of LiveView. Playout B 2.0. Airy Trinity with Joe Lindsay. Camera Rigging. David C. Smith with PlatePros.com. HDR The Future of LUTs and Conversion. Calvin Roberts. IBC Release Highlights. Blackmagic Design Camera Updates. iPhone Update. A Practical Guide to Interviews. Camera Sensors. Lab Anatomy of a Commercial. Final Cut Pro Summit Update. EVS Playback and Recording Workflows. Blackmagic Design Camera App. Building LUTs. Rundown Studio. That was a lot of territory that we covered over the course of that year. And I was just, it has been really a privilege to be here and learn from so many people. I was thinking about the highlights as I was watching that the other day, and I think top on my list is just the live stuff we were able to do. The events we covered, CES, NAB, Cinegear, IBC. I thought not only did I learn a lot about broadcasting to the web, it was just a privilege to work with so many people on the office hours back-end crew. We've said this before, but if you've never volunteered for one of the things we do in the live realm out there in the field, it is such a great group of people, and I had so much fun talking to and working with. I think my favorite out of the whole year was Cinegear, because I got to work both sides of it. I got to go on location to be a little bit out there at Cinegear on the lot. But then I also got to host the show from here, and both perspectives really gave me a palpable sense of how powerful the kinds of things we're doing to go cover a show and take the entire audience's suggestions as to where we should go next and what we should cover, this interactive part of what this live on Zoom experience can potentially do was really just very magical for me. The other two things I wanted to mention really quickly that really stuck in my mind, the NBC series, that's what I'm calling it, HDR glass to glass, the HDR objective color metrics. Brad Woodall is doing remote spots, and I think we had others. That stuff gave us such an amazing look at the high end of broadcast with people you'd never be able to sit down with. And they just told us so much about how the top end of the industry is working. My brain expanded gigantically every one of those shows that came out of our NBC friends, and it was just very cool. So if you go back and look at some of those, you'll learn a ton, I think. And the last thing I wanted to mention is the breakdown videos that we did. I thought we did a decent job of those, and it's part of our mission to try to help people learn from all levels of this. We did analyzing frame rates, analyzing video interviews, video framing. We took a look at all these things, and these are kind of the aesthetic skills of producing content. And I like it when we talk about both the production side, the technical side, and the aesthetic side of things. And so I think we had a nice balance of all those things over the course of time. I'm going to go to Alex first. Alex, what were your tops for the year?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I think we were really successful in bringing some really great experts in, everything from Robert Greene to my brother to the guys from Thursday Night Football and just so many experts, the CTO from LiveView, we were just talking about LiveView, and having a lot of these experts come in and really talk about stuff from the ground, I think was really, really valuable. I do like some of the stuff that we did is from a theoretical perspective, but for me, what really stood out when I watched that kind of that group of framing was, it was a lot of great people that came in and contributed to the conversation, and I think we were really fortunate to bring those folks together. A quick reminder, though, is that really this is if you're watching right now, I'm sitting here with my notes open. You can hear me typing, and I am typing in all the things that people put up there because it is something that is super important to us to get your feedback on the things that both you liked but most importantly, the things that you want to see more of. Definitely let us know what those things are, because it's something that, this is our cheat sheet, and we really come back to this over and over and over again as we kind of work through it. And what I want to do is also show you what the format looks like. I think that if you didn't see it yesterday, just kind of like what we're looking at for next year, having this little. This is
really cool, Lex. Here, if you think that it just random shows up every day,
yeah.
Alex has an incredibly detailed plan that we all kind of pay attention to.
Yeah. So
when we have go ahead.
The subjects aren't totally finalized yet. We've talked to the councils about it and still think about it a little bit. But to give you a sense of what this actually looks like, this is kind of how we're setting up the format. So if you look at this right now. For next year. So we have, of course, the business, graphics, sound, video, and infrastructure. And then what we're doing is, so there's a couple of things that we're thinking about as we build this format. One is that these are the different days. So we have different verticals that we cover each day, so people know when, if they're interested in something specific. But number two is we want to keep moving through different things. So there's a mixture of the luminaries and vendors. That means those are guests coming in with stuff that's internal. That has a couple reasons. One is some of them include the panel and some of them don't include as much of the panel as far as the discussion goes. So every other one is including the panel more actively. Secondly, it also takes some pressure off of our folks prepping. Every person that you see, every guest that you see is typically 1 to 2 hours of someone's time, usually Josh's, to prep them and make sure that they're ready to go. And then there's a lot of work that gets done to make that actually happen. So we're going through all of those, and then we offset them so it's not all 1 week of luminaries. So they're all offset this way, so you can see that you kind of see that structure there. And then what we're working on this year, and that we did that a lot of last year, but what we're doing this year is starting to work through these subgroups that'll rotate every quarter. So you'll see a general. We want to talk to a creator. We want to talk about the future. We may change some of these things, but that's these are the different things that we're kind of looking at. For each one of these, and what that means is that I can go out and go. And they're all lined up. So the idea is also, it looks perfect in January. It gets a little different, but first week of for business first week of a month will always be a luminary. The second week will always be a basic, and it'll be slightly different for these ones because they're all offset. The goal is to get to a point where people know what what kind of show we can expect. We won't always hit it, but this is where we're trying to go. Now, what this means is I can go out here and go to September and say on the third week of what on Tuesday do I want to get for the third week in September, and that's an AR. That's what I'm looking for, and what it guarantees is I can schedule that far out, but I can also make sure that I'm still maintaining a certain amount of diversity. So we're, each one of those sections is, it's basically three different rotating systems that are all interacting with each other so that we can have, we know that we can just schedule as far out as we want. We can start sprinkling things in, but we know that those things are going to be, viable. And we know that if you're watching all those, the programming will constantly be evolving, and covering all the things that we think are important within our industry. So, and we're not just getting into ruts where we're talking about stuff, the same thing over and over again. So, anyway, so that's that's kind of the format of it, and how we fill those again is really up to all of you. So again, we have some opinions about what we want to do, but the cheat sheet that we use is what you as the viewers come up with as ideas to post here so that we can kind of see that. So definitely make sure to throw those in.
TJ, you had some thoughts.
Yeah, like you said, Bill, the NBC stuff with the sports and the HDR glass to glass. I mean, that was just mind-boggling to see how much effort it takes to really get something we sort of take for granted as I'm just going to flip on the TV and watch a sports event. The effort of so many people that go into making that just seem so simple was just astounding. But for me, the highlight was Alex's brother, Joe, when he was doing the live demo and interactive question session with Joe. I really liked that, and it kind of got us into a little bit different area of where we had gone. So we're touching a little bit more on filmmaking as opposed to just sort of some video stuff, and kind of harken back a little bit to the early time with Chris Summers talking about some of the cinema stuff that he was doing. Now I know, unfortunately, with the closing of 3210, one of the plans that Alex had of being able to kind of do a session like that interactively may have kind of gone away a little bit, but I would still kind of like to get some of those live demos again.
And we're definitely going to work on getting more of those. Joe had a really good time doing it as well. So it was a lot of work. Joe had, get up at 4:00 in the morning, drive down to my house to do that. And there was a back and forth about my bandwidth was better. So he came to my house rather than me going to his house. Anyway, but we're going to, I just talked to Joe a couple days ago, over Christmas, and we're definitely working on how we can get him to come back on, even if he just jumps on and answers questions or talks about filmmaking and everything else. We definitely want to bring more of those in, and we are looking for some studio space and some other things that we can put together. Some small productions where, I realize that, we think really big, and I really want to do it in a really large way. But we did one with Brent By where he literally built a set with cardboard boxes. I kid you not. And with the short depth of field, you had no idea. It just totally worked. And so I think that doing some stuff that we just find in open space, start shooting and taking questions, I think we're going to also look at doing that as well.
And the thing with your brother is that's what I was talking about in terms of it married technical with aesthetic. He was talking not just about what he does, but why he does it. And I think that's often missed. There's a gazillion YouTube tutorials out there about how to connect things and about, the functional structure of how it works. But that mystical little, what is great framing versus okay framing, very few people will actually actively discuss that. What are the aesthetic qualities that elevate a particular shot above the other ones? And so the fact that we are able to do that sometimes in the right circumstances, I just find that very satisfying, because that's, I believe, the hardest thing to learn. And I've learned that from working with art directors for years. I used to try to design pages on my own, and then it was only when I sat down with actual qualified art directors that I started hearing them talk about, weight and balance and all the subtleties of what goes into making a really beautiful screen that I was opened up, and that improved my work. I never got to their level, of course, and I won't because they do it 24/7 all the time, but I can take little pieces of what they taught me and incorporate it into my work, and I will be better because of that. So there's just so much to learn on the aesthetic side as well as the technical side, and I love the fact that we address both of them. It appears to me, I think we're ready to dive into some of the questions. So we're open. We got a good group of questions coming in. So let's start.
From Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. Dave says, I really enjoyed the behind the scenes at the tennis match. Maybe we can find one or two other settings to explore.
That was so exciting. 1F Jeff and Sky and a bunch of other people were out at the tennis venue, and they walked us through. Talk about a live event. It's specific. We got inside the truck. We got to see how many cameras there were, where they were positioned. We got to walk around the tennis stadium and see all of this happening live. And it gives you a palpable sense of how much technical work goes in to doing something like a live sports broadcast. That was a fabulous show. Alex?
Yeah, I think that in general, the BTS stuff has been super popular. You know, whether it was watching Marcia cut concerts or tennis or, I think that finding ways that we can do shoots and then let you watch us do the shoots, I think is going to be something that we're going to focus on next year. We'll probably try to do something at least once a quarter, more often if we can get the resources together to do that.
Yeah, fabulous. That I just think everybody enjoys that. That's the nuts and bolts of live production are always fascinating. Next question.
Dennis Carmichael suggests efficient editing workflows, Final Cut Pro, Resolve, etc.
Oh, that'd be interesting. Alex, have you thought about it?
I do think that we're going to look at ways that we can talk more about those workflows of exactly. I think we talked about one yesterday about, syncing up, doing round trips with, it's kind of like what day does it fit in, but doing round trips of audio for, so we're going to send it to Logic or send it to Pro Tools and then bring it back to Resolve or Final Cut or Premiere or whatever. That what is the, what makes that work the best, and understanding what those things are, I think makes sense. And I do think that, I keep on feeling there's a Rosetta Stone that wants to happen, which is that, hey, we're going to do something. We're going to edit something in Final Cut and Resolve and Premiere or whatever, and have 3 different people who know how to do it really well do the edit that's roughly the same edit, or maybe it's the similar thing, and then we all talk about, like walk through the workflow of what that takes to do it, and what we think is stronger or not as strong. So it'd be interesting to do that as well.
TJ?
Hey, Bill, you did that lab on Final Cut Pro editing last year, and I attended all those sessions and really enjoyed that. And I think it would be interesting to see some of that happen, not only for Final Cut, but for like Resolve and perhaps even Premiere as well.
Happy to do it. One other thing I was thinking about, I have a friend in Los Angeles, Sven Pape, who's an editor who has a YouTube channel called This Guy Edits. And one of the reasons Sven's become very popular and very successful on YouTube is that he breaks down that aesthetic part of editing. He spends less time talking about how to push the buttons in the software and more time talking about a scene breakdown and what he did to drive character, things like that. And he's worked with some pretty serious directors. And so maybe we can get Sven on to do a show, or other people who have been kind of at the top end of editing content, whether it's YouTube content or films or whatever. It's interesting how they think about pacing and scene structure and revealing information or withholding information. And I've learned a lot from watching some of Sven's stuff. And so that might be an interesting thing. TJ, do you have a follow-up for that?
Yeah, it would be interesting, even kind of going on what Alex said about the Rosetta Stone thing, even like both, like say you and Chris Fenwick both are Final Cut Pro editors. And it would be interesting to see an approach like the two of you took, even with the same tool, just, the kind of getting to the aesthetics and your creativity and how you're going to tell the story.
Yeah, it'd be fun to do. So if we've got room, yes, I'm up, I'm in, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know, I can't speak for Chris, and Chris may or may not have the schedule bandwidth to do that, but I'd be open for it. Let's go to the next question.
Adrian Watkins from Wellington, New Zealand suggests roles in production with industry folks to illustrate, like we have with Joe Lindsay as DP.
There are a lot of interesting roles. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that I feel like that Joe's was a really big success, partially because I'm partial, but my brother's a lot of fun to talk to about production. So he's just he's both very, very particular and very casual at the same time. So it makes it fun to watch a show, but with him talking about stuff. But I think we can find other people that can do similar things or set things up. I've talked to Brent Bye a little bit. He's been really busy, but he's another person that I think would be a lot of fun. I want to bring Nate back on. Nate was one of our first second hours, Nate Hill. And I think it'd be fun to bring him back on. I've also been thinking about bringing some other TDs on just to talk about stuff. Part of what I thought worked the best with some of these productions, I think it works well to have Joe sit there and talk about it. But I think that, again, part of what happened with Joe is we had hoped to bring him to 3210 and then we lost the space so that he could be in like a little scene. But I think, like, for instance, for some of these, it'd be great to get folks to do something and then, and whether that becomes a second hour or not, but do something and then maybe come in a second hour. So there might be like a workshop that we do that people can watch. And then there is a second hour, we kind of break it down and show it and then also answer questions. So I think that we're going to play around with that, but seeing more production, I think, is really important to what we're doing. And so you'll see us really focus on that a lot more.
Cool. And I think maybe some things like lighting and stuff like that we've talked about in the past, but those hard skills of how to get a shoot done would be useful. Let's go to the next question.
Roscoe Jones from Madison, Indiana suggests techniques and tips for round tripping when editing, or do you try to avoid it whenever you can, and why?
Chris.
Yeah, I almost raised my hand on the last editing question. I think the thing about round tripping, Roscoe, is actually, yes, I forgot we're not answering questions. This is a great topic because it really does apply toward workflow. You may not need to round trip, and it's a whole discussion. I mean, you can get into the details of how to do it, but also just designing your workflow from the beginning. I always find it interesting at the beginning of a big job, especially when there's multiple editors, is those meetings that you have where you approach the strategy about how to go about doing something most efficiently. And this would be a fun topic to touch on.
Alex?
Yeah, and I think those round trips happen in a lot of places, whether it's for color, for sound, for CG, for animations, so on and so forth. Those can all be things that you end up round tripping in and out of your NLE. And so I think that's a really interesting coverage. I also think what Chris talked about is I think there's probably a whole one on planning your project. That may not be necessarily a Thursday subject, but how you get maybe a Monday subject how we get together and decide who's doing what are the naming conventions, where are we going to store all of our footage, who's going to submit it, who needs access. Like, those are big meetings that sometimes don't get done in time.
And
so
when they don't get done, we've found out it's hurt us later because people are talking about the same file with three different names and nobody can find anything. It drives you nuts. Yeah, perfect. Next question.
The worst is when you're low man on the totem pole and you say, hey, we should have this meeting. And everybody goes, no, we'll be fine. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
And then about a week or a month later, it's like, gee, if only we had thought about this beforehand.
Hey, can you pull up the blue shot? Which shot? The blue shot. Yeah. Well, what number is it? No, it's the blue shot. It's where all the stuff's blue. Yeah. Just kill like 10 minutes of stupid edit time trying to figure out what shot you're talking about. Next one.
Adrian Watkins from Wellington, New Zealand says, can we do a short film and walk through each part of the process from ideation through delivery over a few weeks? It could cross over every weekday.
Ooh, that would be an interesting. So some piece of short content, and it'd be interesting to look at it from different points of view. One of the things that it surprised me when I first started learning editing is how I would rewatch the same scene 10, 15 times, and it would never get boring because each time I was looking at something different. I was looking at, are the shots good? Do I have to color correct anything? Then I go through the same shot and I would go, how does it sound? Do I have to make any changes in sound? Then I would look for the pacing, and then I would look how it fits in the scenes before and after it. And my wife would occasionally walk in and go, you've been watching that same scene for an hour. And you're going, yeah, but I watched it 10 different ways to try to inform myself about what this scene really contains. And I do think that's a big part of how editors kind of process things. Chris?
Alex, I don't know if you remember the name, and it's slipping me, but I know that our friend, Mr. Mestman, had an organization that was based in L.A. They may still be doing it. It's
we make movies.
We make movies.
There
you go.
Yeah.
You know,
Sam and I are talking. So
okay.
we're talking about things. Yeah, so it'd be lots of discussion there. But yeah, I think that we're thinking pretty hard about how to bring that kind of interactive element into the process. So stay tuned for more than that.
Nice. Good to hear. Next question.
From Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada. Could we try and get someone from the F1 on-car camera team on to talk about how they create the cameras and the control and broadcast of the system?
You raised your hand on it, TJ. You're really excited about this, aren't you?
Oh, yes. Like I said, taking something we sort of take for granted as watching an F1 race, the level of complexity there is just, scales above, like, say, a football game where you've got, 4 miles of track to try to cover. So I would definitely like to see something like this.
It's a popular hot topic. What did I see on Netflix? Gran Turismo, I think, which was fascinating. And there's so many movies that are based around racing because it's such an interesting topic. Alex?
Yeah, we actually had someone from F1 in After Hours a couple of years ago walk through all the bits and pieces who actually knew a lot about it. It's hard to get folks. This is where the second hours become hard. Is sometimes they can talk. They can't talk on YouTube, but they could talk in After Hours. It's not like it's secret, but it's not like something you want to put on YouTube. So that's the challenge that we have there. But we'll see if we can bring someone back and see if we can't have them talk a little bit more about it. So stay tuned.
Next question.
A suggestion from Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. Lens Day.
Ooh, lenses can be talked about almost. It'd be great to be able to set up something where, yes, a lens pointed at a chart gives you a lot of technical information, but also lenses pointed at people. Sometimes it's really interesting to see what does an 18 millimeter lens do to a face versus what does a 35 millimeter lens do to a face? What does a 70 millimeter lens do to a face? Those are different kinds of looks, and when you need them and when you don't makes a big difference. Alex?
Well, I think that there's probably a couple days in here about lenses, which is, talking about lenses from a creative perspective and then also talking about lenses as a technical perspective. What are the technical things about a lens? So we can talk about whether they distort or not, but what creates vignetting, or where are they the sharpest, and how do you define what that is? And, do you get something that has back focus or not? And do you get things that have motors or not? And so there's a lot of, I think, we could have a whole technical discussion about lenses, and then probably do the creative and then the technical. But understanding what those decision processes are would be really useful. See if we can bring some lens experts in, some DPs that would really have strong opinions. And
DPs that have strong opinions, and maybe also the people from like Lens Rentals or Borrow Lenses or something like that. Maybe somebody at the top of that heap is really good and understands. Their test people must really understand huge amounts.
I'd probably bring someone in from a smaller more film-driven rental company, but we could definitely take a look at that.
Yeah, interesting. Next question.
CJ Covell from Downingtown, Pennsylvania has suggestions. Interpreting video scopes with practical examples of properly exposed shots with scopes. Video pathology, similar to the Audio Day, SDR and HDR color pipelines. A 4-week focus on color grading. Basic luminary subject vendor.
Ooh, lots of technical stuff there. Alex?
Yes, all of those. So I think we've talked a little bit about some of them, the SDR and HDR color pipelines that we've talked a little bit about, but we can keep on talking about those. I definitely think that talking about color grading is something we want to do more of. We did a little bit of that in the early days. We had Charles, bringing him in, but we'll see what we can do there. But and I know CJ does color as well, so we can bring have a couple different things that are going on there. We are talking to some scope folks that are a vendor, but can also tell us a lot about scopes. So hopefully we'll get that sorted out in the not too distant future.
Cool. Next question.
Mark Giuliani from Washington, D.C. Lighting plays such an important role in all productions. Can we have some of our lighting experts discuss lighting for Zoom meetings?
I don't see why not. We've spent a lot of time. I mean, the reason that Office Hours looks the way it does is that Alex set a high standard for, we want the lighting and the sound quality of this show to be as top-notch as we can make it. So those of us who've been working in the industry for a long time, absorbed that, agreed with it, and the next thing you know, we're all doing 3-point lighting and various forms of trying to make ourselves look as cinematic as possible on this show. And I think we've, to a large degree, succeeded. Alex, what are your thoughts?
Well, and I think that we traded notes a lot. We haven't done it as much recently, but we should bring it back. And we're going to do a Ruthless review on Saturday at 9:00. That's for anybody who just wants to go into after hours and do just have a discussion about that. Or maybe it might be a separate meeting. But anyway, take a look at the email that went out. But that I think allowed us to trade notes. So a lot of us started trading notes back and forth about what we're using, and I think we all started to kind of coalesce around some ideas. And so I think that is I think it's a great one. I think that there are some tips and tricks that definitely make it easier and make it look better. And what I have found is that it turns out to not be as expensive as I thought it would be. I think that what I have now is probably a third of the cost or a quarter of the cost of what I started with. When Office Hours started, what I was using was at least 4 times more expensive than what I have now. And so I think that talking through what those things are would make a difference.
Next suggestion, really.
Roscoe Jones from Madison, Indiana suggests gain staging for video in the digital era. Where might the signal go wonky as it moves from camera to stream in a live show? And secondly, where to pay attention as the picture moves through post? Can we fix it in post?
That's interesting. I never heard of gain staging for video, but it really is a thing now with all of these separate stages and everybody becoming their own broadcaster to the web. Alex?
Yeah, I think that in a live process, we try to do it in the cameras, but in post, you definitely have people undershooting things all the time, and then someone having to pull it back up again. And there's a lot of discussion about how that would have been great if it had been done correctly on set. So I think definitely talking about what that means, I think would be very useful. Absolutely.
And actually, just today it happened to me because I have been using the same presets all the way, but after the Zoom blacks issue and not crushing them, everybody said, you're kind of bright today. So we had to rebalance. TJ and I just did a real quick one. And so now I actually need to come back and dial in my settings and save them again now that Zoom has made a change. So I think we're going to see the constant need to be able to adjust based on how changes in pipelines that we can't control take place over the course of time. Next question. Next suggestion.
Dave Troutman from Edmonton, Canada says, how about shooting for edit? Planning a sequence on site and shooting it with the edit in mind and room tone.
Yes, Alex.
Recording for edit or recording audio for edit would definitely be good as well. But I think that shooting for edit, I think it'd be great. I think that all shooters should have to edit something of their own. They should go out and shoot things and then come back and edit them. It definitely it dramatically changes how you shoot because you suddenly realize, oh, I need, like the number one when someone hasn't edited very much is when they don't give you any head and tail. So they, you get a bunch of videos and it just started right when it started, and there's no just running a little, a couple seconds ahead and before and after. You can always tell someone edits a lot because they'll stop at something, and then you see them just kind of just keep drifting or just keep holding on to it to give you something that you could use for another 2 or 3 seconds, And so I definitely think that, and then also, I had to shoot a bunch of stuff that was little 1-minute pieces about locations in San Francisco, and just all the pickup shots, like all the things that we needed, I'm going to have someone talking about something, but I need close hands. I need these. Some of them are operational, like I'm telling a story with it. And some of them are just, I need to make sure that I give you a bunch of stuff that you can throw in as pepper and salt and, things, and allspice, so I need you to throw a bunch of things in there. And so, I think it'd be a great one. I think that, we did something in PixelCore that I thought was really useful, which is that we did challenges, and I'd like to put challenges back in to what we're doing, but we would challenge people to go out and do something, together, or not together, but on their own. Like one of the ones we said is we did a thing where we challenged everybody to do a 1-minute video about your favorite place where you live. Just pick whatever that favorite place is and do a 1-minute video. And everyone did what they, and explained it. We gave them a little bit of a format to do it in. And it was amazing. You learned all this stuff we learned stuff about Switzerland and London and Africa. We were in Zimbabwe and Australia, and all these people doing these little short videos that about some little place that they liked. But a lot of us learned, what it helped us do is learn about the things that we needed to do to make that actually work. Anyway, I think it's great.
Yeah, I learned that under the title coverage. You got really slapped down real quick if you came back from any kind of remote shoot and you didn't have a variety of shots. You didn't have establishing wide shots. You didn't have mediums. You didn't have close-ups. You didn't have reverse angles. You didn't have any of the basic building blocks of telling a story such that the editor was constrained and wasn't able to fix problems. B-roll cutaways being a traditional Band-Aid in the video world so that you have something neutral to cut away to cover a jump cut or a bad edit. And so, yeah, all those things, shooting for the edit, I agree with Alex 100%. You change how you shoot when you have to edit. You realize if I just had this shot, I could make this sing, and I don't have it. And why didn't I get it? Because I didn't know I was going to need it.
Yeah, and one of the things is that nowadays you could shoot something much better than what I shot back then for actually getting paid for with my iPhone. Like I was using like an EX1, and I can now I could have a DJI stabilizer and all these moment lenses and do all this crazy stuff and shoot something that is a much higher quality than what was there before. So this is really about the edit and less about the camera.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they dance together. There's nothing nicer than sitting down as an editor with great footage to work with. It just really inspires you. And there's nothing worse than sitting down to edit and having 15 medium shots of a speaker at a podium and not knowing how you're going to turn it into something interesting. Next question.
From Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. When software or hardware just won't cut it. 2 workflows, 1 software, 1 hardware, and why one might be better in specific situations. What old workflows are now better done over IP?
Interesting, Alex.
I do thinking about like in the video production realm, what is better or worse. Like I think that talking about there's a certain convenience and flexibility that software brings and looking at something like, hey, and I think that again, this is one of those, hey, we're doing this in hardware or we're doing this in software, and what are the differences between the two? For instance, the main thing that, Mimo Live, I can do most of what I'm doing in Mimo Live inside of my ATEM, but the audio is way easier to deal with in Mimo, because I'm just wiring it all in and all the things are in there, and some of the I/O is easier, and so it's a much more straightforward thing for the Michael Krasny show. So I've made that decision, and I did the first ones on the Extreme, and then I moved over to Mimo because of the convenience. And then I can also, there are things that don't look, I can do things on the ATEM that I can't do on Mimo. And so I think that there'd be a great discussion about talking about which ones make the most sense for what projects.
I remember sitting down just about maybe a month ago, and I was looking at my system here and I was going, wow. The capabilities in a laptop now, and I was thinking particularly about things like loopback and things like that, audio routing, video routing, the ability to bring in effects. What I have in front of me now with a smaller system that costs 1/10 of the equipment before is so much more flexible, but it also puts a little it gives you so many options that you have to figure out what are the right tools to use to do this thing, because most of these tools are multimodal and really fascinating. I think that's one of the things that Office Hours has done well, is to look at some of these very complex things and try to help people understand how to dive into them, what are the strategies for learning how to use it, and what are the problems it can solve, because it's amazing to me what we do every day here. And I think it's going to get nothing but more amazing as the industry continues to evolve. So cool. I think that the hardware software conjunction, where one ends and the other begins, what's necessary in each, what can be replaced by something else, and as Alex is often want to say, what hardware gives you the kind of reliability where you don't worry about a crash or something like that taking down a show. Where's that fall over where I shouldn't be using software, I should be using hardware, and vice versa. I've been using hardware to do this. Now software is good enough to replace that and make it easier for me to do my work. Big topic, and one I think will be fun to talk about. Let's go to the next question.
From Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. How about addressing low-end, price-wise video conferencing?
Well, we talk about it a good little bit, but I don't see any reason not to. I mean, basically, this is a video conference at a very, very high level. We're all meeting here every single day and putting out a show that looks very much like a show that you might watch on television. So it's been interesting. We've talked a lot about this in terms of the aesthetics of how, why does so much Zoom video at the corporate level still look so terrible? And I still, up until a month ago, I was seeing people who came in the lower corner of their, they're talking over here for an hour and a half on a Zoom meeting and they paid no attention to any of the rules. And it hurts me to see it. Alex?
Yeah, I think that I think that we could back up, because I think sometimes, obviously, because a lot of our rigs have gotten a little out of control because we've been doing this every day for years. But I think that backing up and talking about a little bit of what are the basics. I think there's a show there that wants to be like, what are the very basics of video conferencing? We talk a little bit about that echelon when we're prepping people, but it's basically get their Ethernet working, then get their audio working, then get their lighting working, then they get their camera working, then get the background working. And we try to solve those one at a time. But there's also basic framing and how to set things up and what are the challenges. And I think that thinking through that for an hour, I think makes sense of, we're not trying to use big cameras. We're not, we're going to use even your built-in camera, but how do we get the frame to be correct? Like little things like, we just want to move the camera up, like just getting this frame that we have right here, just get them into that frame, get everybody in the same frame so they're not all up and down and all those things. And so I think talking through just I guess I would almost call it triage, video conferencing triage, which is just like not have everyone look horrible. Like we're not trying to, win an Academy Award or an Emmy. We just don't want them to look messed up, or sound messed up. And how do we fix that? And I think that's actually would be a really good show.
Yeah, maybe video conferencing first aid.
Exactly.
This is the most basic stuff that you need to know how to do to protect yourself from damage. Next question.
Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania has a very difficult one. Do we know anyone who could guide us through the filmography of Star Wars?
No, I'm sorry, we don't. No. Oh, Alex, do you have a different opinion?
Well, I think that it would be interesting is I believe that this year, if I'm correct, is the 25th anniversary of. In fact, it'll be in a month or two. I literally thought of this reading this question, like while this question was getting read. It's 25th anniversary of Episode 1, the movie, the Star Wars that I worked on, because I think it was released in, I want to say February of, I don't know the exact date, but February of 1999. I remember because when it was released, there was two things that happened. One is they did all the re-releases right before it, so those all came out. And then the second thing is that because I think those happened in 1998, like it was like cruising up. But we all had some of George's wine. George has some. He has a winery, a vineyard at the ranch. It's not all those grapes, but anyway. But anyway, it was. So I remember having that. So anyway, I think it'd be a fun show. Let's figure out what the date is and see if we can get maybe some folks that worked on it as a round table would be a lot of fun. That might even have to be a special. Like I don't even know we put that in a second hour. Might even just separate it completely and let it run as long as it wants to run.
The obvious day is May 4th.
Well, May 4th. No, May 4th is for Episode 4 or Star Wars, the original New Hope. But yeah, so that's doing something about Star Wars in May is great. But I think that there's an opportunity to do something that is around the re-release of just Star Wars Episode 1, because there's a bunch of, that was the first time we came back to the genre. And, you have to remember that like in 1999 it was released, but the pre-pro for Star Wars, I think, started in 1993. I came in 1996, and I think that David Dzoritz, who was that I worked with there, I think he had been there for 2 or 3 years when I got there doing previs. And so we'll see what we can do. That'd be a fun show. That'd be a really fun show. So yeah, stay tuned. It's a good idea.
Next suggestion.
From Craig McFarland in Boston, Massachusetts. Craig says, I'd love to hear about covering a sporting event over a long distance, like the Tour de France.
Ooh, there's a small undertaking. I actually have a friend who worked on that for IBC in that part of Europe because it floats every year. So yeah, it'd be interesting. Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, these are really complicated. I've worked on a couple of really long races. I worked on one that was, I think, 100 kilometers race. And so the coverage of the mixture of helicopters, drones, motorcycles, fixed positions, all of those things. And I actually know some folks that I worked for for that show. I was managing just the Mokana part actually. But I think that would be a really I have some people I can bring in for that. We'll take a look at that. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Next question. Next suggestion.
From Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. Can we bring Doc Rock into the video day to explain the features of Ecamm software for organizing a streamed presentation?
Oh, I didn't know it did that. Alex?
Yeah. Doc Rock has been in before to talk I think we just did a talk about business and so on and so forth. I don't think we really got into Ecamm. It'd be great to have him back on Ecamm. Doc Rock is amazing. And I've been on a couple shows with him, and we had him on here last year. But having him come in and just talk about Ecamm would be fantastic. So I think we would definitely bring him back. So stay tuned for more of that. Yeah, it's a great idea.
And next question.
From Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany. 1,000 ways to bring movement into the shot. When using which device, and why is one better than the other?
Now, that's interesting. When I read that, are you talking about blocking and people moving, or you're talking about the camera movements? Alex, what do you think?
I think it's both. I think it's just adding flavor to it. I think as someone who does visual effects, one of the things you laugh at all the time are the birds, because you always see we added the birds to the shot so that it doesn't feel like, if you do a matte shot, smoke and birds are two really popular things. Little chimney with some smoke coming out of it and some birds will sell the fact that nothing else is moving in the shot. And so so that's but I think that it would be fun to talk about that. One thing that brings me, I don't know why but I do have a friend that does a lot of matte painting work, and it'd be fun to bring him on to talk about, how that gets done, especially for TV, because I think that a lot of us, think about film and there's these big divisions. Like, he did all the visual effects for Alias by himself at his house outside of Seattle.
Wow.
So wow. I think that, just all the visual, all the digital effects were all done by one person for that show. And so I think that figuring that, having him walk through some of those would be a lot of fun. I'll talk to Eric about that. Yeah.
Okay. It's on the list. Next suggestion.
From Mark Giuliani in Washington, D.C. Mark suggests, along the lines of Ike's question, how much movement in a shot is too much for streams? What breaks at 30 frames per second?
That's actually a really good suggestion, Mark. Do you have any other notes about it?
Well, just, sometimes you'll see in watching streams that lower thirds or any action and animation and any of the graphics just starts to break up. Are there tricks to making it work better?
Yeah, and things that worked in analog, one of my favorite tricks in my early days when I was starting to camera op was swish pans and things like that, because I discovered entirely by accident that if I took a swish pan across the interior of a store or something like that, and then I slowed it down to maybe 10%, it gave a nice kind of dreamy floating background for titles and things like that. So I used to do swish pans on every location I went to with the hopes that I might be able to turn them into something aesthetically pleasing in the final video. And I used them a good little bit for a good period of time. Movement in a shot, that is on one side, and the other side is that it's harder to compress particular types of shots that have too much change in them. And so if your goal is the smallest possible delivery out, that same kind of movement, or even a slow movement where the pixels are all changing moment by moment, really affects your compression. Alex?
And I think it's also different for streaming versus WebRTC. So if you're delivering something to Zoom, there is a certain set of limitations, and this is anything that's doing WebRTC, and then there's a different set for streaming. And I think talking about those would be useful. Like, one of the things that we do, even though our countdown clock doesn't follow this rule, when I do presentations, you can always tell that I'm prepping it for Zoom because it's all flat. There's no gradients, because I know that the gradients are going to break up a little bit, And when I do streaming, I do the same thing. I try to get we have a lot of folks, unless I'm controlling the encoding, I usually will move away from a lot of gradients because you'll tend to see the posterization that goes on, either posterization or other things. But I think talking about what works and doesn't work, whether it's movement, graphics, backgrounds. So like, when we had one where someone had a whole bunch of, they were outside and they had a bunch of scenery that was going back and forth. And I was like, that's not going to look good. I could immediately tell them and of course the whole thing, what happens, the whole thing started breaking up, but the person started breaking into blocks because it was just overloading the system. So I think talking about what those things look like would be great.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Next suggestion?
From Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Roscoe says, this covers graphics too. The sessions explaining human vision with Ray were fascinating to me, as are any of the ones with Charles and colorizing.
Yeah, I think everybody has been really excited about that. And color has become more and more. I mean, it used to be the purview of mostly post-production professionals who did color, but the tools have been built into so many other pieces of software now, and we have different tools that we never had before. So anything that helps people understand both the science of color and manipulation of color in the common tools that everybody has access to, I'm sure that would be very, very popular. Let's go on to the next question.
From Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Berlin, Germany. Can we talk about codecs? When to use what codecs? ProRes, HAP, etc.
Sure. Alex?
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I mean, really talking about when to use H.264 versus ProRes versus AVR, like a lot of different codecs that might there. I think you listed HAP. I've never used HAP, so we would talk about that. What those different codecs do, why we use different ones that we have there, I think would be really, and talking about what makes them different, I think it would be really useful. Yeah, absolutely.
Next question.
Chris Sabato from Albany, Oregon wants to learn about color matching multiple cameras that are not the same manufacturer.
Oh, Alex?
I keep on promising that we're going to work on this, and it takes a little bit of a setup, and I don't have anywhere to set up. So that's what's delaying this one. I know we need to do this one, and we will definitely do it. So this year we'll find a space that we can talk about those cameras, because what I'm trying to do is find a space that when I do this color matching, you do have to do it in a controlled environment, and then when I use it, we need to take it to a set and have you see it. And getting both of those two things together has been something that's taken me a little longer than I expected. So anyway, so stay tuned, but we are working on that.
Okay, next one.
Jeff Cohen from Miami, Florida says, I'd love to see Michael Forrest demo and QA his new QCam presenter for Mac to complement his Shoot camera app.
Oh, that would be very cool. Everybody likes a good teleprompter kind of process, and if he's got something that's innovative. Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, happy to have Michael on. So if he wants to come on and show a new app, he's always great. So Michael, if you're listening, love to have you on. And otherwise, someone should reach out to Michael, but we'll get him on the schedule pretty quick. Absolutely.
There you go. Open invitation. Next question. Next comment.
Roscoe Jones from Madison, Indiana suggests basic video camera care and, as Guy said for audio, what's in your kit bag? What won't you leave home without?
That's always a popular thing. Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd love to do that one. Basic camera care. I have this thing like if you work with me, I'll make a bunch of decisions about people for how long the lens stays off the camera. So if you take a lens off and don't put the cap on in less than 10 seconds, I just don't think you're serious. I don't think that, because cleaning sensors is so much of a pain in the neck, and I don't want, to do it well and to not scratch it and do everything else. And so it's just like, really? And so like when I go to change a lens, I set that lens down, I set the camera down, I have the lens cap loosened, I loosen the camera, pop them both off and stick it. And usually for me, it's 2 or 3 seconds that's opened. And there's a whole bunch of rules there. This is just an example. And then I watch people take them off and just set them down and have the camera like sitting on its back with a sensor up. And I'm just like, I don't think that person really should be doing that. like should be. I mean, I don't mean doing that. I mean doing the job that we hired them to do. Like I make a bunch of decisions about like whether we should hire them again to touch our cameras if they're going to do that. So I think it'd be great I'd love to talk about all the pet peeves that we have when that happens.
I'm more than a little bit the same way, predominantly because I learned my craft in Phoenix, Arizona, which is known for a little bit of dust. And so I'm probably more in the 3 seconds, 2 seconds. Can we get it down to 1 second?
There's a huge difference between people who own cameras and people who rent cameras.
Oh,
when you
God,
when
yes.
you own a camera, you're super touchy about this, and when you rent cameras, you're like, whatever, we'll figure it out later.
Yeah, the first time you get back and your whole shoot day is ruined because you had a big glob of something that got dumped into the camera innards. Ugh, awful. Next question. Next suggestion.
From Chris Sabato in Albany, Georgia, Oregon. Streaming settings, profile level, constant versus variable bit rates, keyframe aligned, etc.
So a lot of technical things there. And the interesting thing is that they're very important as topics, and understanding things like profiles and variable bit rates and things like that, they have a big effect on things. The utility of setting them on camera to cameras change and things like that. So I think we have to talk about the generics. But Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that we definitely should break this down. We have an issue that one of the best experts for this does not like to get up in the morning. That I know. And it would be great to get her back on, but we might have to do a special session. These workshops might be one of those things where I build a workshop around her time frame because she's the world expert in these things. So anyway, I think that you're going to see kind of one thing you are going to see outside of Q&A. We'll definitely do it as a second hour. I mean, I'm happy to do it as a second hour, but before we do it as a second hour, we'll probably do the workshop. And these workshops you're going to probably see starting to pop up that are outside of our time frame, where we find the time that works for the guest and find the time that, and also let it run a little longer or other things like that. So stay tuned for that.
All right, next suggestion.
From Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Berlin, Germany. Can we break down the making of a documentary? Financing, then story, shoot, edit, music, and then selling the film.
That would be a really fascinating one. Documentary is, I just stumbled into the documentary section of Netflix recently, and I can't believe the number of documentaries done just in the last couple of years that I had no clue about. It seems to be a very, very active part of the production landscape out there. Alex?
Yeah, I have a friend that's done a couple documentaries for Netflix as well, so we'll see if we can get him on to talk about the whole process. That'd be great, and maybe even get a team on to talk about a specific documentary of what it took would be even better. So we'll see what we can find there.
I actually have a really good contact. One of my friends in Los Angeles, Chuck Braverman, has been a producer over there forever, and he did produce things like Challenger, The Lost Tapes, that were long documentaries that were done. And so, yeah, I can probably
I'm pitching a documentary. So I'm pitching a documentary. So
let's get Chuck on. You can talk to him.
Yeah, because if we do it, we'll shoot tons of behind. Me, if we actually get the documentary for Netflix or whoever ends up buying it, we're gonna. It's a documentary that needs a year to build, and so anyway, so I think that we'll see what we can do.
I sat down and had lunch with Chuck at the Creative Summit.
That's
it was
great.
a great to catch back up with him. Let's go to the next topic.
Our final one today from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Roscoe suggests putting teams to tackle some of these small projects we have just recommended here today.
It would be a great thing to do. It's one of the best things about this community is you have a lot of people who are very passionate about everything that we talk about here every day. And, that combination of learning things that happens every day, but also getting to know people. And I agree with Alex about this. There is no better way to get to know somebody who's in your profession than to work shoulder to shoulder with them on some sort of volunteer project so that you can learn what they do, they can learn what you do, and you may find that magic moment of connection where you're saying, this is somebody I'd like to work with for a long time. Alex?
You're seeing the start of that when we talk about event coverage and we're talking about the Eclipse coverage. In Pixel Corps, we had 27 teams. So I've been careful not to overwhelm the system with adding too many at one time because we didn't start in Pixel Corps with 27. We started with like 3. We started with 1. And then so you'll see us start to think about some of these things. And we had a format that I think worked pretty well. So stay tuned. I think that we're definitely going to start thinking about how we put together teams and let you work on something that isn't necessarily live that we make work. So yeah, stay tuned for that.
Thank you, one and all, for your contributions today. This was a very successful one. At some points, I thought we were going to be a little light, but as always, you came up with great suggestions, and they're in the hopper now. Don't forget, right after the show, 1 hour from now, the Isadora Lab with L. Wilson Spiro takes place. That's at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Amazing opportunity to learn Isadora. Saturday, immediately following Saturday's show, is the Ruthless Review Lab in after hours. So if you've got some camera questions or your audio wasn't working right or whatever, sneak in here. The other thing I need to say, as I do every time I'm on, and Alex says at the end of all, thank you. Thank you. Thank you to the producers who have asked the questions through the course of this show and all the shows for the last year, to the panelists who show up every day and contribute their knowledge and expertise. I'm proud to be just a part of this, tiny part of this huge undertaking with so many people who have been studying this stuff for so long and have generously agreed to be here to share their expertise for no compensation whatsoever, just in the hopes that we make this easier and better for everybody. And to the amazing back-end crew. Today was a great example of that. I would not be on this show today, and I think TJ and some others, we had little problems. Who solved it? This amazing back-end technical brain trust were able to all come together and fix everything and make the show start as it should have. Tulloch Traversal today, 112,546 miles. That's 181,125 kilometers. More than 891 million of these yellow things for scale. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
Every day we think, oh, we're not going to have enough questions. Oh, we're not going to get it. And it always ends up with like pushback questions for the first hour, and then we get to the end of the
weird. I was so sure.
That's why I always tell everyone, don't bother to talk about that because it's not going to happen. Like we have great producers. You don't know our producers. You don't know what they're capable of. They're capable
scary
of
good people.
I mean, we've had 55,000 questions. It's more than 55,000 questions at this point. So there you go. It's a lot of questions. It's technically very quizzical. There we go.
Good to see you today, Mark. And you too, TJ. Good to have you on the panel.
Good seeing both of you. Glad you